Buddhism and in Buddhist psychology particularly of virtue and non-virtue, morality and ethics and no ethics, that kind of thing. And this is the Buddhist view very much about why we're happy and why we suffer. We suffer if our mind, the more pervaded our mind is with misery and depression and anxiety, which then causes us to lie and steal and kill, the more we suffer. They're the source of our suffering. And the more our mind is imbued with patience and kindness and love and compassion and generosity, and therefore the wish to speak the truth and not harm others, which is called good ethics, that's the extent to which we're happy. So the Buddhist psychological approach is completely linked to ethics. I think we don't think like that in our psychology. It's kind of interesting. We don't factor that in, because it sounds a bit too heavy. We don't like to, it sounds like right and wrong, good and bad, and we're a bit nervous about that. But it seems it's very reasonable in Buddhist terms. It's not because you're going to get punished or rewarded. There's no view like that in Buddhism. So in Buddha's model of the mind, he's got like 84,000 distinct different neurotic states of mind, but then they all narrow down to 3. And if we read even one Buddhist book, we're going to have heard the term the 3 poisons, these 3 toxic emotions, And the main one that runs our day, runs the lives of all sentient beings, until you're highly realized, until you're like a bodhisattva, until you've realized emptiness and are a bodhisattva, pretty much. Then we're all driven by attachment, which is this kind of this spectrum. It's got a spectrum, it's got from all the way to the most intense dissatisfaction from having practiced it in the past, to then always hankering after something because you're always dissatisfied. And as Amitabha says, that's the main cause of our suffering in this life. You can see, we know some people who might have really suffering lives, but are quite satisfied. And this is a big shock to us, because the logic for us is if you've got a mean husband and no money and have to work 80 hours a week, you've got to be dissatisfied. But no, some people are satisfied. And that is a very powerful quality. We don't, again, factor that in our psychology. It almost seems like a mistake. Some people are just satisfied. Some people, even if their lives are suffering, they're more content. Content, satisfied means less attached. Attachment means neediness. Attachment really is emotional hunger. And we know perfectly well you can have a multi-millionaire with 42 husbands in the best house in the universe, they're dissatisfied. And we wonder why. We think, well, that's curious. Why are they dissatisfied? Because we link everything to the external. And we know many people who work really hard, who are kind, compassionate, and who are satisfied. It's a pretty profound meaning, actually. It's a pretty profound concept. And it fits with the Buddha's view, because the deepest characteristic at an energetic level of attachment is actually dissatisfaction. Never feeling you are enough. No matter what you get, it's not enough. No matter how much you have, it's not enough. No matter how much your boyfriend tells you he loves you, it's not enough. No matter how much your boss praises you, it's not enough. No matter how much food you get, it's not enough. No matter how many handbags you get, it's not enough. No matter how much money you have, it's not enough. And everybody's attachment is dumped onto a different thing. It's the energy of dissatisfaction itself, not the object, that's the problem. But because it's so primordial, and of course the Buddhist view saying that our mind comes from a past life, we come programmed with our tendencies, I mean, there's a person now who's like in their 20s and they've got a difficult life, but they're content. They're quite satisfied. They don't get angry. That's because they got born with it. It didn't just come and pop out of the sky. It's not like luck or good luck or bad luck. So if you're like that, if you're satisfied, reasonably satisfied in yourself, not always stressing, always wanting something more, not always looking like a vampire for something else, it's because you've practiced in the past. So be so happy. Don't just take it for granted. It's an incredible quality, an incredible quality. And then when you're more content in yourself, you're more humble. And therefore, even if life is difficult, you'll manage it, you'll navigate it, and then you'll be more compassionate as well. You see some people like that. I mean, it's so interesting. Look at the different stories. As what I love about the difficult times like now, the newspapers and all the different media and everything that usually just focus only on the bad things. It's in these bad times that you get lots of good stories. It's very moving. I mean, the number of moving stories, isn't it? Of children even. There's a story in the Washington Post, I think, recently. One 7-year-old little boy, he's a little bit fat, who got bullied at school. So he decided he was going to Forget about being bullied, and he started to think about all the poor people. So ended up with his mum, and they're getting these semi-trailers of food and things, and it's growing like crazy to give to poor people and to give to these old people's home over there and this children's home over here. I mean, the only person who can think to help others when things are bad is a person who's content in themselves. Otherwise, you're going to be miserable, full of self-pity, go crazy, get depressed. And I'm not criticizing. We're all suffering. We shouldn't criticize ourselves. This is why we suffer. So the more bad things happen, the more internalized we become, because we've got attachment. And when attachment doesn't get what it wants, we get stressed, we get depressed, or we get angry. One or the other. I can see this with my friends in prison, you know. It's so stark. So stark. It's incredible. There's always this woman I talk about. You know, she's got a website now. She's out of prison, got out in the 90s. And in the 70s, she was arrested with a husband, hippie, teaching in Florida. Her name's Sunny. I always talk about her. I think there's a movie made about it. There's a play about it. She's written a memoir. She's such an example of this. She did yoga and stuff. But we sort of think it's just like good luck, you know. She just turns out this way. Well, there she was, accused of murdering 2 policemen. She's on death row. Her husband even got executed. And I heard recently when I talked to her that her husband, his head exploded into flames when they executed him. I mean, can you imagine the nightmare? And she's watching it, you know. So she eventually found to be innocent, because she was innocent all along, and so was he. But she didn't lose the plot. She was in solitary for years with a Bible. That was it. And most people go mad. There's no question. But she had this mind. She had patience for a start, which we think is just like some sort of dumb quality. But she was patient, which means you see, patience is a powerful state of mind. We think patience is like gritting your teeth and waiting for that horrible thing to go away. We think of patience as like passive aggression, but patience is a profound quality. It is the ability to handle, to manage problems without going crazy. That's what patience is. The opposite is anger, and that's why we all go mad, and that's why we kill each other and ourselves. But we don't use these terms in our psychology, do we? Oh, I had a very angry patient today. Or if we did, we don't think it is their problem. We don't think it is psychology. We think, oh, I wonder what his mother did to him. I'm being a bit naive here, a bit sarcastic. But these are profound qualities in Buddhism. Buddhism identifies them as profound. So this woman, Sunny, had patience, but she also had intelligence. So she said, I knew I had the power to choose how to think. She was in this nightmarish environment, in a cell on her own, accused of murdering 2 policemen. Nobody believed her. Husband had been executed. I mean, you can't imagine the more of a nightmare. You'd go mad. In fact, I remember at the time I first read about her years ago, I also read about another fellow on death row, also innocent, who we would consider normal because he had anger. And I'm not criticizing. We've got to observe all these states of mind and really look at them. He had anger. So he went completely out of his brain. He lost his mind. He would scream daily as long as he had a voice. I did not rape and kill that woman. Now, the fact is, both of them were right. They were innocent. But okay, whatever the reasons are, Buddha's got a reason, all about karma, never mind that. But each of them responded differently according to their own mind. So and we understand that suffering. I mean, look when even the smallest bad thing happens, you know. Someone doesn't do what you want. Your husband is mean to you. Your sister didn't speak to you quite perfectly. Things don't go the way our attachment wants. It's brutal, but that's the way to say it. And when attachment isn't getting what it wants, and this is the point about the pervasiveness of attachment, it's this primordially deep, instinctive assumption in our being. And because the Buddha says we've had it for eons, totally instinctive now. We get born with it, come into this life, programmed. So this attachment, the assumption of attachment is I must get what I want every millisecond. We don't articulate it like that. It's because it's so instinctive. It just drives us. This is why we suffer. We shouldn't feel guilty hearing this. We should be crying with compassion for ourselves, you know. So this woman had the ability, because of not much anger. And what anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So if you're on death row and you're innocent, I mean, anger is it would be the most reasonable response if that's your habit. But for for whatever reason, one man, his response was anger, and the other woman wasn't. So because of this, she had space in her mind that she could think. She had the incredible courage, and this is actually quite advanced. I mean, when we talk like this is the teaching that they teach in the Bodhisattva path, well before it's the most advanced level of practice. It's called transforming problems into happiness. This is intensely difficult practice. You've got to first control your body and speech at the first level of practice. Then you've got to control your mind and do masses of purification. And then we can be brave enough to start transforming problems into happiness. It's taught at the most advanced level. But this woman, she's not a Buddhist. She's just not a Christian. She's a Jewish woman, but not religious. She had this ability. She was able to tap into her own ability to realize she had the choice to change the way she thought in that nightmare. So she didn't ever lose the plot. She didn't sit there and become depressed. She was proactive. So she changed her mind. I mean, it's just so astonishing if you hear it. She had no books, no people, 23 hours a day, 24 hours a day in this cell for years, on her own. And this other guy, same condition, but because of different tendencies in his mind, that means lots of attachment, that means lots of anger when he wasn't, and then incredible pride when you're not believed. People, that's what going mad means. This in Buddhist terms is why we go mad. It's very powerful analysis. Buddhist view is almost too simple in the beginning to us. It seems so uncomplicated, but it's profound if we really understand it, So you should ask Geshe-la or Gendon to teach Low-Rig again and go into more details about it. That's the text that teaches about the mind, the components of the mind in Buddhist psychology. But the trouble is when we study it, it seems so intellectual, we can't put meat on the bones. We can't hear the experiential component of it because that's the inner work we have to do. And this is what being a Buddhist is. Being a nice person, the very first stages of practice, if you know the Lam Rim at all, the very first stages of practice is control your body and control your speech. Well, that's common to everybody. A good communist, a good Muslim, and a good Buddhist would control their body and speech. They behave nicely. That's common to the world. That's nothing special. That's the first level of practice for Buddha. The next level, that's where it's unique. That's where you become a Buddhist. And you apply Buddhist distinctive view about the mind. Not a soul, but the mind, not physical, not coming from your mummy and daddy, not coming from a creator, coming from the past, all these other components of the mind, the way Buddha describes it. That's where you become a Buddhist, where you become your own therapist, where you start to reconfigure, become familiar with, and then deconstruct, and then reconstruct and reconfigure your actual cognitive process itself internally, not the brain. That's what being a Buddhist means. I don't care if you call yourself a Buddhist, but that's what the job is. And that's what's powerful. But the tragedy of ego is, the tragedy of strong attachment and strong anger and strong depression or whatever, is that we believe this is who I am. It is set in stone. I don't have a choice. But not only that, if someone had gone to that man out of his brain with rage and despair, and that's what suffering is, that's what Buddha means by suffering, is not criticizing anybody, and said, well, there are methods to get less angry and to stop suffering. Our response would be, if we're the person, excuse me, but I'm allowed to be angry. I'm innocent. What do you mean I should not be angry? We are shocked by that concept because we see anger as a valid right. When someone does something wrong to you, you are allowed to be angry, and I must be angry. And the thought of not being angry to us sounds like just you're suppressing that person, and it's like outrageous to us. So the philosophy we have, the view we have, the way we interpret attachment and anger with our materialist models, our neuroscientific models, and with ego's model is very, very different from the way Buddha describes. And it's not easy to hear Buddha's view initially, because it sounds like you kind of got to put up with something. You got to shut up and put up with it. That's not what he's saying. Because the point that Buddha's making is every millisecond of what goes on in our mind is the main source of my happiness and suffering. So it's totally for one's own sake. The first stages of practice, you are the beneficiary of that practice. Yes, as Lama said, if you learn to control your body and speech and not kill and not steal and not lie, and you learn to control your mind and not get angry and depressed and jealous, then you are the beneficiary. This is the method for you to be happy. Whereas we hear it in moralistic terms. You shouldn't be angry. You shouldn't kill. You're a naughty person. That's how we hear it. That's our own projection. It's Buddha's method for how to get happy. We are the beneficiaries. But of course, as Lama Zopa says, the rats and roaches will have a party because we leave them in peace. So the first stages of practice, we are the beneficiary. Then you get to the compassion wing, and now it's changed. Now it's for the benefit of others. But you can't benefit others until you benefit yourself. Not possible. Utterly impossible. Because when you're in your own misery, if you can't see past your own nose, so you can't even help a fly. So the first stages of practice, junior school and high school, the first and second scope of the Lam Rim, is for the one's own benefit. And this is where Buddha gets us to try. But this is the Buddhist way of saying the culmination of this first stages of practice. They call it renunciation. Well, even that is a forbidding word to us. Well, what are you giving up? You're giving up suffering and its causes, honey. I mean, how divine. But we hear it as giving up happiness. Lama Zopa says, oh, when I hear I've got to give up attachment, because that's the essence of renunciation. Oh, I've got to give up my heart. I've got to give up my happiness. That's how we conflate that. It's just misconception because we don't have a proper interpretation of attachment according to Buddha's view. So if we say we like Buddhism, it's not just saying I'm nice malas or dressing up like a 14th century ball person like I am, or walking around looking all holy, And that's what I remember. There's a story. I can't remember. I think it was Atisha back in the 11th century. A bit rough on the history, but I think there's this lovely story. Some fellow comes up to him and said, oh, I just did my circumambulating of the stupa, and Atisha said, I'm very happy, but now I'd like you to practice Dharma. He said, oh, all right. Oh, okay. Then, I just did my prostrations, and Atisha said, I'm very happy for you, but I'd like you to practice Dharma. Oh, okay, I'll do my malas. I just did my mantras. Well, I'm very happy for you, but I wish you'd practice Dharma. And slowly, what he meant was work on your mind, mate. I mean, Tibetans don't say it that way. I'm saying it in a very Australian way. Work on your mind, baby. Look at your mind. So when you give up anger, that minute at the kitchen sink and your husband's slurping his tea and you want to punch him in the nose and you work on your anger, that's Dharma, honey. You can sit there meditating for 1 hour every morning, look at your breath being all holy. That ain't Dharma, baby. If you're lessening anger, lessening attachment, controlling your body, controlling your speech, that's Dharma practice. That's what Buddhism calls it, Dharma practice. That's being your own therapist. And what's the result of that? Your own happiness. And then you're removing the veils from your eyes as you do this, and you start to go, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. Look at it. My hubby's suffering as well. But if only you see him through the lenses of your own annoyance, you just see an annoying person. And we all do that, So when you remove your own attachment and anger a tiny bit, you open your door to see others more. You empathize with the other. You connect with the other. That's why the compassion wing is more advanced, I tell you. It's incredible. It's very inspiring to hear that. We think compassion sounds all lovely, be nice to people. But look how hard it is to be nice to somebody. I mean, you're happy to go to work and be nice to some, people you're helping at work. But if you can't be nice to your hubby while he's slurping his tea, then you've got a long way to go, baby. That's the one we've got to practice on, isn't it? That's the difficulty. So it's been so moving seeing these stories. I love reading these stories, these amazing people. Like, some fancy couture designer suddenly making masks, or the best chef. I remember in Australia, some fancy chef making meals that sent off to his sister who was a nurse, and now he's providing thousands of meals. You hear these stories all the time. But my point here is we like these stories, but let's analyze that. A person who is able in difficult times to be kind to others and to see other people suffering, that's a pretty profound quality. Because the other one is when we all suffer, the other approach is become more depressed, more self-centered, and I'm not being mean because this is why we suffer, and overwhelmed by suffering, and why is no one loving me, and why is no one giving things to me? Whereas the person who's got the ability to see the suffering of others, even when they are poor and they're struggling, they see, I want to help others. And this is what's so interesting about helping others. I mean, easy to talk about it. I mean, the compassion wing is pretty intense, you know, the level to which we can grow love and compassion. And it feels kind of exhausting sometimes. I mean, we know how hard it is. If you're sick, if you're depressed, if you're angry, if you're, you know, it is so hard to think of others. And it seems almost like unfair, you know, when you're so overwhelmed with misery yourself. So we have to know where we're at, and that's the point. And this is where we get very confused about the wisdom wing and the compassion wing, just using that analogy, which I like a lot. You know, sometimes you have people in relationships or at work or in families, they're the good girl. They're always running around. They're the one who does the dishes. They're the one who sweeps the floor. They're the one who pacifies everybody. But they're the one also who gets treated like a doormat. And that's the commonest way many people suffer. And so we think, well, then we hear the Buddha says, well, you got to, you know, how you get happy is by being kind to others. So you say, well, I'm doing that. I am being kind to others, but how come people dump on me? How come people are mean to me? Why am I not happy? Why am I feeling depressed? Because we haven't done the wisdom wing part first. We haven't looked into our own mind. And what this gets us to is seeing the deepest level of attachment at all. And this is not, again, this is not taught until the Bodhisattva wing. The very first level of practice, the attachment is taught. The way we harness our attachment is mainly in terms of the gross sensory objects. Don't have 7 pieces of cake. Don't dump on 5 boys a day. Control your body, control your speech, control your attachment. That's profound. But a more advanced level of attachment, and as we all know, if we've read the Buddha's teachings, they call it the 8 worldly dharmas, this weird phrase they have, you know. And all it means is it's just a subtler, more pervasive way that attachment functions in our daily lives, you know. And so the deepest one of these, more than attachment for sex, drugs, and rock and roll, is attachment to the way we're seen by others. In other words, the very having of ego for the Buddha, the very having of this neurotic sense of a separate self, which is what gives rise to I want, which is this neurotic attachment, the very having of a sense of a separate self is itself, the symptom of that is being a separate, lonely, bereft, I'm nothing and nobody. And that's the irony of attachment. Attachment is feeling I'm nothing. So then the deepest way that we feel dissatisfied is we don't feel we're worthy. So therefore, that's why we're hungry for a boyfriend, hungry for a person to say, you're a nice person, Rubina. In other words, we don't know we're a nice person until someone says it. That's how suffering we are. And so the deepest attachment we have, they call it attachment to reputation, attachment to how we're seen by others. And that's what drives everything. The deepest level of our neediness is this one. Look how distressed we get when we're alone. Look at the suffering of being alone now. People being lonely. Lonely means there's no one to speak your thoughts to. There's no one to share your feelings with. There's no one to smile back at you to make you feel you're a valid person. So it's wonderful to have friends. We need that kind of life. But when we look at the deepest attachment, that shows how bereft we are. We think we are nothing until someone says we are something. That's how deeply suffering our attachment is. So if we can have some semblance of contentment in who we are, that means we have more courage, we are more authentic, we will be more courageous, we will have the courage to say and do what is right because we won't be so worried about people not approving of us. This is the main suffering on this planet of all sentient beings. They say the yogis in the mountains who've given up everything, they're still thinking about what the people down in the village are thinking about them. Because that's the voice in our head mostly. We're always thinking about what people are thinking about us. And we're always adjusting our behavior to be seen as a good girl. So that's the suffering of the good girl syndrome. She is a good girl. She does help mummy. She is kind. She does try and make everything nice. But she doesn't see that it's her way of being, her way of validating herself. We've all got attachment of some kind or other, you know, but we're all different kind of recipes of the same different ingredients, you know. And this is a very hard one to distinguish. The doormat, you know, the person who's patient, who puts up with problems, but who gets depressed, who gets misused. That's such a common one. Men or women, doesn't matter. There's no difference, you know. And that's, so the patience in that person is a good quality, but the negative side of the patience in that person is passivity. They'll put up with things they shouldn't put up with. So the positive side is they're not going to shout and yell, but the negative side is their aversion internalizes and becomes depression and despair. Another person might have arrogance and attachment, you know, really blatant attachment to be seen as the fanciest person in the room. That's obvious. You'll see them prancing. But this other person has got attachment to be seen as a good girl, so they'll be quiet and mousy. So we've got to see our minds. And the Buddhist model uses these same states of mind for all of us, but they're very very nuanced. The understanding of them is very nuanced. And we can't go deeply in with this model of the mind unless we study this model. I use this example a lot because when we think about mindfulness meditation, you know, it is very much watching your mind, watching your thoughts, watching the breath, or just watching the mind. There's anger, there's this, there's that. That's good. We need to do that. But often we don't. If with mindfulness, the analogy is a bit like this. If you're, let's say, you know, you've got a garden and you're going to learn to be mindful of what's in the garden, you will concentrate on the garden and you will get such good concentration, you'll be able to not identify, but you'll be able to see exactly what's there, and you can even replicate it in a drawing. But listen to this. If you haven't mixed that mindfulness with botany, the intelligence of botany, you can look at that garden for 10,000 years. You will never distinguish a herb from a flower because you don't know the names. So the same with your mind. You can be as mindful as you like, but if you don't know Buddhist psychology, and Buddhist is very distinct, I'm not talking about Jung or Freud, you can learn them if you like. We're talking Buddha here. If you haven't learned the theory of what is attachment, what is love, what is kindness, what are their characteristics, then you don't have a basis for interpreting your own mind. You've got to have Buddha's view of the mind if you say you're a Buddhist. No one's forcing. You can use Freud or Jung, or you can make up your own. No one's stopping you. Buddhist is very distinct, I tell you. And then it just takes time to unpack and unravel and to identify, because and the key thing about this attachment and anger and jealousy and all these emotions, which is how we refer to them. We refer to them as emotions because we only notice them when our body is shaking, or when your body is inert in bed because you can't get up because you've got profound depression. We only notice what's going on in our mind when the body is involved. And that's just the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. It's just too late. So the Buddha's view is, you know, learn to know the names of the parts of your mind, distinguish the delusions from the virtues, because they're all mixed together like a big soup right now. And then you get your concentration meditation, which is the tool you use, that then you can look with laser-like focus into your own mind and unpack and unravel. And that's the job every second of the day, if you're really doing it properly, you know. That's our job every second. That's being a Buddhist. All the way from here to Buddhahood, that's being a Buddhist. As one of my therapist friends said, she's a Buddhist too, having your hands in your own shit. It is not comfortable. But that's being a Buddhist. So that's where the integrity comes. That's where the clarity comes. That's where the ethics comes. It's an incredible job, you know. That's why we've got to want to know our own mind and not be scared of not wanting to hide it from other people. We're desperate to hide ourselves from other people. And mostly we succeed at that because other people can't see our mind because they can't see their own. But we have to have the courage to want to see our own mind. This is what being a Buddhist means, you know. And then on the basis of this, we are able to then see others and know how to help them. That's the point. It's very logical, you know. I don't know. Anybody got any questions? Got 20 minutes to go. Any questions, people? Any old question? I don't mind what. I just need a quick drink though while I organize the. Anything there, Matt or Charmaine?
No, Venerable, no question.
Anybody put their hand up? Anyone? Any spontaneous questions? Come on, talk to me. No, okay, you don't have to have questions. It's all right.
Question, Venerable.
Oh yeah, and Rosanna's got a question. Oh, sorry, Rosanna, you got a question, darling? No. Rosanna? She can't hear me. Rosanna's frozen. I thought Rosanna had a question. Maybe she'll come back in a minute because the picture looks like it's frozen. But you got one, Charmaine. Come on, what is it?
I'm sorry, Venerable, I didn't. I just wanted to let you know that Rosanna had a question, but
Oh
she's
yes, but it's frozen. I can't see. So it'll maybe come back in a minute. Let's hope. Who else? Nobody? Excuse me, I'm sniffing.
Maybe, Venerable, you and I were speaking yesterday about how part of the job of watching our own mind is identifying our own delusions.
Yes.
And then also about the effect of karma in that picture. Maybe.
Yes, true. Now that's another whole discussion, another whole dimension to it, you know. I mean, the way we're talking here about knowing our own minds, I mean, you don't even have to use the word Buddha, and it sounds, everybody understands. We all get it, you know. It's we all really hear it loud and clear. But let's add the Buddhist, the piece. This is Buddhist, but let's add the piece that's overtly Buddhist, but which is really interesting, you know. Yeah, this I find is incredibly helpful. But this, of course, is totally the Buddhist view. So the Buddhist view is the mind. Whatever we think and do and say with our mind leaves seeds in the mind, and those seeds don't go astray, and they slowly will ripen today, tomorrow, next day, and next life in the person we become. So we create ourselves, basically, which is not a very big surprise. I mean, if you play the piano for 27 years, nobody's surprised that you're a good pianist. So who created the pianist? Not Bach, not your teacher. Independent upon Bach and a teacher and Mr. Steinway's good piano, you turned yourself into a pianist. We get that when it comes to knowledge, not when it comes to happiness and suffering, which is quite fascinating. So Buddha says the same as that. We produce the person we become. And what produces it is what goes on in our mind, and then what we do with our body and speech. It's really quite logical. It's sort of shocking we don't notice it, you know. So, okay, one thing that's enormously helpful, I find, as a Buddhist, to understand our own life, and therefore the lives of others, is to understand this view that I come into this life programmed with what I've done before. In the same way that the musician that you are today, after 27 years of practice, is the result of the past. And what you do today produces your future. Well, Buddha's view of past and future happens to be more extensive, that's all. It starts before, the past goes back before this life, and the future goes back after this life. It's not very difficult conceptually, but it's quite shocking to us, because it argues with the Christian teaching, and to some degree, and it argues certainly with a materialist view, because we track ourselves back to mummy, daddy, and the monkeys, isn't it? So it's a different view. Okay, so whatever we think and do and say turns us into who we become. And you can divide into 4 categories the person we become, and our life and our experiences. And this is the way karma works. So all these seeds, so for example, give a simple example. If you come into this life, first of all, we come into this life, we have, as a human, we're human beings, okay? So that's not just good luck. Mummy and daddy are not the cause of it. They're just having sex and we come barging in. And there's certainly no concept of a creator for the Buddha. It is the fruit of very strong, virtuous, non-killing habits, that karmic seeds that were triggered at the time we died, that would then caused us, our consciousness, to leave that body and then run like a magnet a few weeks later into my mummy's fallopian tube while she was in sexual union with my daddy. Okay, it's a different scenario now with petri dishes and things, but the principle is the same. Okay, so that means there's a very strong history with me and those 2 people. But there's Rosanna, she's back. You came back, Rosanna, good. So I'll get your question later, honey. Okay, so the first way that our karma has ripened, we caused it, was we got a human body. Now, as far as Buddha is concerned, we should be blissed out, just what we won the lottery. The amount of hard work of virtue and morality practice, as Lama Zopa says, in the context of living in a life of keeping vows of morality, if we realize how hard we must have worked just to get this human body, it would blow our minds. That's the first one. Now, forget that one. Now let's look at the 3 different ways our past actions are ripening in the present. And you can divide those into 3. And the most immediate, the most obvious and the most immediate is the mental tendencies in this human mind. So clearly you can see Hitler's got a human body, and so did Mother Teresa. But there's a big difference between their behavior, isn't there? Why? Because they're tendencies. So having the human body is the fruit of one lot of karma. But the second way it ripens is the tendencies in that mind. So then we look into our mind and we can see, let's say we've got a tendency to not kill from having practiced it, living in vows of not killing in the past. The first result of non-killing, we got a human body. The second result of non-killing is you wake up in this life with no thought to kill anything. Now, if we look at our human planet, that's quite rare. Most of us kill something. Even our religions, with respect to them, tell us it's okay to kill. You know, I mean, I was taught as a Catholic that God made creatures for our benefit. I mean, there's just different views, aren't they? Buddha's deal is every single sentient being wants not to suffer. Every sentient being wants to be happy. So please don't harm any of them, baby. So if you come into this life before mummy teaches you with it's because you've practiced non-killing in the past. So the second way your non-killing will ripen, the second track of karma is your tendencies. Now the next one, and this is where we get very confused, this is called experiences similar to the cause. So if you look at it, we're all very social beings, aren't we? We have mummies and daddies and siblings and aunties and next door neighbors and dogs and rats. And then we have next people, and then at school, and then we grow up, we go to work, we have people in the street. We are very social. We bump into sentient beings throughout our life. We interact with them. So the way we are seen and treated by others, that's called experiences similar to the cause. So we get very confused here. So then, for example, you know, my friend Sunny in prison, there she was with these good tendencies. She had good tendencies, which is her saving grace. But then she's got these experiences, the way she's been treated. She was not believed when she said she didn't kill policemen. They accused her of doing something she didn't do. So she wasn't believed. That's due to past lying. That in this life, even if you're speaking the truth, nobody believes you. Even if you're, maybe you don't have any thought to steal, but people steal from you. That's from past stealing in a past life. So we link very much how we are now and what happens to us. That's why we're so overwhelmed when, if I'm a good person, bad things happen to me. It just doesn't make sense to us. Or equally, you could be so-called have bad tendencies, but so for example, they say Mr. Trump lies. Okay, the Washington Post has counted the number of Pinocchios. I mean, since he began, I have no idea if he lies. I'm just telling what people say. So Mr. Trump seems to have the tendency to lie. But look at the number of people, and I've seen them on YouTube, who believe every word he says. And he even said himself, I could kill somebody on Fifth Avenue and people still won't believe it. So he's got a group of people in this world who think he is divine, who adore him, who love his politics, who think he's telling the truth, who think he's wise. So that's just the view. That is from those people. He's got a particular karma with those people that due to powerfully good karma in the past. He must have told the truth in the past. He's had humility in the past. He's not harmed others in the past. He hasn't been angry in the past. So that karma is ripening for him as experiences similar to those causes, but in relation to that group of people. So it's really, when we understand this, it's liberating, because we realize one is who you are now, which has very little to how you're being seen. We know this, and this is why it's so tortured for us. So, I was just talking to Charmaine yesterday, because she's a therapist, so she has clients. So I'm quite sure some of her clients might have mental problems. Join the universe here, folks. Everybody, we've all got mental problems. If you've got attachment and aversion, honey, you've got mental problems. So some people's might be particularly strong, but often the people who suffer more is because they've got the experiences, really bad experiences. No one likes them. They live on the streets. They've got no money, but they might have not very much attachment and anger. Whereas you might have another person who doesn't go to a therapist, who's got more anger, more attachment, more psychosis, but has got good karma, reputation karma, who lives in a fancy house on Fifth Avenue, who's got millions of dollars in the bank, but who everybody adores. So we conflate these two, and these are very separate things. It's very powerful to understand this in our own lives, because we think, if I'm a good person, why aren't people seeing me as a nice person? That's why we go mad. But it's separate tracks of karma, separate tracks. These two in particular, what goes on in here is one thing. They're from one bunch of habits, and then how you're seen and treated by others is another bunch of habits, and they often don't connect. I hope that it really should be liberating for us to understand why bad things happen to us. It was very funny. One time I gave a talk in Miami, and it sounds like a joke. It was me, a rabbi, a Lutheran, and a Catholic. It does sound like a joke, but it was a real meeting. It was a seminar. And the topic was, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, it was, I mean, the Lutheran and the Catholic, I have to say, I didn't understand their answers very well. It's okay. But I gave my talk about karma. It was easy. Well, the rabbi clapped. He said, we think the same thing. He was a Kabbalah rabbi. So he said, we have a saying, every time something bad happens, we go, great, one less debt to repay. He was cracking jokes about Hitler. Excuse me, I don't hear Jews crack jokes about Hitler, because he's a Kabbalah rabbi. They have the view of karma and reincarnation. So this is very powerful for all of us. We might, as Buddhists, know the word, oh yes, it's karma. But that's like saying, oh yes, it's botany. Well, can you give me a bit more precise, please? No, I can't do that. You've got to be more precise. So you can have negative tendencies and everybody can adore you, and you can have best reputation karma, and you won't bother going to a therapist, I promise. It's only when you're treated badly, or you're homeless, or people think you're a creep, or you're put in prison for something you didn't do, because that's the suffering part, because we all want to be loved. We all want to be respected, you know. So as a therapist, it should be a revelation for somebody, not to confuse their poverty or confuse their kind of, you know, people not liking them with their own qualities. And they're quite different. They're quite separate. But because we have so much craving to be loved by people and to be respected, you know, so we will consider ourselves happy if we've got a good reputation and money in the bank, but we're lying and stealing like crazy. Whereas a person who's virtuous, like my friend Sunny, we'd feel sorry for her. But actually, you should be delighted for her. She created incredible virtue during those 17 years in prison and continues now on the way out, helping other people. So she cleaned up her karma by having the suffering. Whereas a person who has negative qualities, but has good treatment and is seen as a good reputation, they're just using up their karma, ruining it, tipping it down the toilet, you know. So it's very powerful. And not to mention a third one is called environmental karma, the way the very physical world impacts upon us. And I mentioned this before, but this is where COVID-19, you know, is very interesting analysis right now. So the experience similar to the cause is third track of karma, what happens to us, you know. The result of killing in the past is you die young or you get killed. Well, look at all the people dying of coronavirus. That's the result of their own past killing, specifically manifesting as an experience similar to that cause. But look at the millions of us who don't get coronavirus, but who are experiencing the environmental result of killing. We can't even kiss our own girlfriend anymore because we might die because she's got coronavirus. So for us, effectively, our girlfriend who's got coronavirus is the environment. She's the environment for me, and I can't even touch her. It's like eating poison food. It's like eating peanuts and you've got an allergy. It's like breathing in bad water, breathing in polluted air. So the way the physical world impacts upon us, that's also karma. This is very powerful, very interesting. And if we get these four tracks clear, we really can interpret our experiences every day, and we can interpret the experiences of others. It's very powerful. Because we think of as a person who's got a good reputation, as long as they keep the delusion secret, we think they must be a nice person. But they could be the worst, most paranoid, deluded, lying thief you could ever have met. But we have another person who's got the karma to be always, you know, living with poverty, always not getting a job, you know, who's not respected. We assume that person's got a bad mind. It's really inappropriate. It's not like that at all, you know. That's why, because we have so much attachment to be approved of, even if we're lying and stealing in our private little world, if we're approved of, we think, oh, I must be a special person. So this is where this addiction to being approved of is the worst attachment of all, and really confuses us and makes us not see ourselves clearly and not see other people clearly. You know? So Rosanna, what was your question, my dear? Unmute. You better unmute yourself, babe. There you go. No, you did it.
Is it good?
That's it.
Okay. In relation, Venerable, to the COVID, there's a fatigue that is happening in our community where it seems like it's not stopping, and more people are getting sick, more of the families, more of the children, and it's coming at us, and it's not stopping, and it's creating I'm feeling it, a fatigue where you feel like you just turn over something and it's starting to blossom and then bam. And
Exactly. I know.
I'm wondering about that. I'm wondering about how to
Deal with
deal with it personally and in relationship to the families and the children.
I understand that, darling, because just to let people, Rosanna works a lot with people and families and children, poor families and poor children, and suffering families and suffering children. But I think, Rosanna, if you think about it, okay, just let's do the analysis using the Buddhist view of the mind as a kind of clinical analysis of why we feel this way. Shall I do that first?
Yes.
And it's not criticism, but it's because of attachment, Rosanna, and because we don't like, and because we think things are permanent. So because we can't stand, so because we've got attachment, okay, because we've all got attachment, and it's normal, Rosanna, it's the universe, monkeys and dogs as well, because we've got this craving for things to be nice. So then because we know that COVID-19 is just a temporary thing, I mean, we're hoping it is, so we keep expecting it to nearly be ending. And so that's what you said before. So you've got the attachment for things to be nice, and then we've got attachment, and part of attachment is expecting the nice thing to happen as well as it be nice now. So we're looking forward to the nice thing, and we think it's coming, we think the numbers are down, and we're all excited, and then suddenly we're knocked in the face again. It's because of attachment. So that's where even I think of my friend Sonny in prison, or anybody when we're suffering. Like I forget Sonny in prison. Think of when you got a headache. So you got a headache, and you know that headaches come and then they go, unless you're one of those people who has headaches all their life, and I can't even stand to think about that. So then part of the attachment is, when you haven't got the headache, you're all perky and happy because you've got no headache. Suddenly the headache comes, aversion arises, so you run for the pill, and then you're waiting for it to go away. So what you're saying is basically the headache doesn't stop. So no wonder that's what the fatigue is. So meaning because we've got such expectation, and that's the function of attachment, that it will end eventually. You see the light at the end of the tunnel, but it doesn't ever come. So of course we're going to get incredibly stressed. So this is why practice is very profound. When we really can learn to continue to be stable, and you, Rosanna, as a helper of your families, you've just got to have this attempt. This is the bodhisattva attitude. No matter how bad things get, you're going to stay perky because you're there to help others. They're stressed out. And if you start getting stressed out too, you all drown together. So that's why it's so admirable, anybody helping other people during difficult times. And you just got to give people confidence. I know it is difficult, isn't it? But we don't know how long it's going to last. All we can do is do our best. But if we do the analysis, it's because attachment is a junkie that only wants nice things and then looks forward to the suffering ending. I mean, this is a tragedy in this country because the numbers are so big. I mean, in New Zealand, they talk about New Zealand because they love that woman who runs the country. If you've read the newspapers, that Jacinda, I mean, they've got 5 million people there, but she's been so strict, and somehow New Zealanders have been kind of compliant. So they have literally ceased coronavirus. There is no coronavirus left as far as they can see. In Australia, it was pretty much the same, but then suddenly in my state, in Victoria, there was a whole new outbreak of it, and it came from the hotels where the people coming back to Australia were quarantined because they weren't strict enough. So suddenly it flared up again. And again, in Australia, they're so strict. They've got 5-kilometre radius. You can't go. You've got curfews. People are getting upset, but it is cutting it. But I think it's not going to end easily if we don't have strict rules. And that's always the dichotomy for people. That's the struggle, isn't it? But the key one is knowing it's the function of attachment, Rosanna, and know that when suffering is bad, and at least if we're trying to help, so you yourself stay stable as well as you can. That's why as helpers, it's really good you go home, maybe have a little weep, have a cup of tea, have a good rest, and then pick yourself up and you go out there again tomorrow and you be the example for other people. You stay perky, you stay optimistic, you hear what they're saying, you love them. And then when you're optimistic, you give them courage. Okay. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Rosanna. It's a tough analysis, but it's quite profound. But that's the function of attachment. It's there all the time, wanting the nice experiences. So as soon as the nice experience is there, we become all content. And then as soon as the headache comes, the attachment shifts to now look forward to the freedom from the headache. And that's why it's so distressing. Like if you're in prison, these people in prison for 20 years, 30 years innocent, who don't go crazy, you've got to admire them. It's so unbelievable because we can see some suffering just won't go away. I mean, it might eventually, but the level of our distress is equal to the level of our constant attachment, and therefore the anger or the depression when it doesn't come nice. But it's not easy to work on it, Rosanna, but that's the analysis, darling.
Okay.
You understand?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so when you are in that situation, it's real. That's why I've heard that so many of the workers in hospitals are killing themselves because they can't bear the stress. It's so painful. It is unbearable, you know. That's why if you are helping others, you've got to have a break, unless you're a bodhisattva, in which case you can do it 24 hours a day and stay perky. But most of us are not at that level. Yeah. So you've got to give yourself a break and got to have a bit of a weep and a good sleep and you got to have a beer, whatever it is that relaxes you. And then you get ready again for the next day and stay optimistic. But the other thing is we've got to remember impermanence. This is the way life is. And if you, I don't know about, you know, whether you like the view of karma, but when we understand karma and why it's happening, at least it's an explanation and you don't lose the plot again. You don't have to tell other people it's karma because that's not their view, but you know why it's happening. So you're not, instead of pulling our hair out, why is this happening? Right. Which is why we suffer so terribly. Why is this happening? That's why I tell those stories about those young Tibetan nuns who were tortured and abused for several years in prison because they have the view of karma so deeply in their bones. They know why it's happening. So they're not pulling their hair out wondering why it's happening. Mm-hmm. What we do in our culture. And then we get all self-piteous and angry and full of rage and despair. So it's very powerful views. It's just up to us if we apply them. You understand, Rosanna?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, darling. Thank you so much for that.
And I know we're at the end. I'm sorry, but I wanted
to yeah, look at that, 6 o'clock.
There was a quick question in the chat, so I don't know, maybe we can address it next time, but
one more now, go on.
Asked, what would Buddha say about depression medication?
Okay, I just want to say briefly what depression is from the Buddhist analysis. We've got attachment and we have aversion. These are the two main neuroses. We go between 1,000 times a day, okay? 1,000 times a day, but we don't notice them until they're extreme. So attachment, when it's extreme, we're like a junkie. And aversion, when it's extreme, is like anger. But they've both got a spectrum. So attachment is dissatisfaction, constant emotional hunger, always wanting something more, always looking for something, never satisfied, always manipulating, always expecting, looking forward to something. And then when we don't get it, it turns into aversion. So aversion has got a spectrum. The most volatile, obvious level of aversion is anger, shout and scream and yell. That's evident. But there are milder levels, and this is where depression comes in. We don't notice these most of the day. We just think they're normal. You get annoyed, irritated, upset. You have 1,000 moments of small anger, and they all build up. And then even more subtle, for the person who doesn't have volatile anger, their build-up of this aversion turns into depression, just despair and depression, and you become inert. So that's in general what anger and attachment are. So we can work on our minds, we can learn to navigate these, but starting, you know, and working very deeply. In the long term, we can definitely completely learn to lessen all these, no question. But meanwhile, if anger is your problem, at least try and control your body and speech and don't kill your boyfriend, at least. Find a way to at least control the body and speech. If you get depressed, the trouble is because we leave it till too late, and so you are inert in bed. Fine, take tablets. There's nothing wrong with that. If we've got a headache, take a tablet, please. If you've got depression and you can find a pill that works on the chemicals, great, go for it. But the real benefit is if you're trying to be a Buddhist, take your pill if you get a headache, so you can work on your mind. Take your pill if you're depressed, but realize all it's doing is affecting your physical, which is fine, but now you've got a chance to work on your mind. So whatever works, whatever helps us navigate lives, mitigate the pain a little bit, lessen it, be reasonable. If it's got worse results, then clearly you've got to make decisions, you know. I hope that helps. So time to go. An hour's worth of thoughts. How many moments has there been in this 1 hour is as many thoughts we've had. So we think how marvelous. And if there's anything that's useful that we've talked about, then we use it as a tool and have optimism, have confidence for ourselves and the sake of others, you know. And do the work on ourselves with kindness, not brutal, not criticism, not guilt, not angry with ourselves. Be kind to ourselves, and then we can be kind to others. There's no question, you know. Jangchub, Semchog Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Guchig, Ke Panyampa, Me Pa Yang Gong Ne Gong Du, Kava Shog. Thank you, Charmaine. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you very much.